Oh, that's a good start. Good afternoon. The Licensing and Regulatory Committee today, the 17th of April. This meeting is being recorded. Item 1, the minutes. To approve the minutes of the Licensing and Regulatory Committee meeting of the 16th of January. You all happy that I sign those minutes? Thank you. Item 2, apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Adams, Councillor Merrick, and Councillor Nelson. Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Is there any declarations of interest this afternoon? No? Thank you. Item 4, consultation on changes to taxi and licensing conditions, policy and guidelines. And we've got a very good friend again, Greg Bickerdike. Nice to see you, Greg. Please start.
Thank you very much, and through you. So this is again another consultation. And I know that it seems like it's not been long since we did the last one, and that is the case. This is in light of the Institute of Licensing's new guidance. We obviously make sure that everything's regularly updated. We want to always be the first licensing authority to implement these changes, so we can always proudly say, well, actually, we do everything to the government standards. So the Institute of Licensing, which isn't it's not the Department for Transport, it's a kind of a trade association. They've published some new guidance. We reviewed all of our policies, and we've also been working with the other licensing authorities in West Mercia area, so Shropshire and Telford. One of the big things that we've wanted to do over the last few years is to have a standard set of license conditions so that people can't say, oh, well, there are different rules here for drivers than there are elsewhere. We know it's not perfect and it's going to change over the years, but we managed to kind of come up with this draft set of license conditions that we're really hopeful is going to provide a bit more consistency, so that people can be reassured that the drivers are meeting the same standard. Wolverhampton's committee has approved a 12-week consultation. I'm coming to yourselves to seek the same. And if we get approval today, we will launch the consultation in the coming weeks. Full consultation, and then we'll bring the results back and any changes that we think is necessary to that, and then that'll be for your consideration as to whether or not to implement the final ones. One of the key things that we're looking at is changes to immigration offences. So the government recently consulted about the types of offences that they charge the traffickers in relation to the small boats crossings. You know, the specific offences that they get charged with. They were recently consulting on them and whether to increase them to life imprisonment in some cases. So there's obviously a consideration that they should be treated much more seriously. And we're proposing to increase the timescales in which people would or wouldn't be granted licences, and for the human trafficking offences, that the council would never normally grant a licence to somebody of those. Not that we get any applications that I'm aware of from human traffickers, but it's good that we've got the comprehensive policy, so people don't say, well, there's a gap in your policy there, you don't address that. So we've got that in there. The other big change is at the moment we've got a certain period of time that passes for people who have drink driving convictions and drug offence convictions, and after that period of time passes, same as any other licensing authority, we would grant them a licence. The Institute of Licensing have said, well, actually, if somebody has got a conviction for some serious drug offences, it's not just good enough to have the passage of time. And really, if those people want to become drivers, they need to pay for their own drugs test and then bring the results to the council as part of their application. And they say, look, here's some proof. I'm clean now, and I can, and I'm a responsible person again. And then we can consider granting the license. So it's providing that additional level of checks in there. I think that is everything that's that in there. It's just to add, the final thing was just about we've had some issues with people who have medical conditions, and normally if somebody has their license, if they're disqualified from driving, then we would want them to wait a set period of time before they could have their license granted again. So in your case, if you drink driving, it's going to be 7 years. But some people, they have their driving license revoked, so it's not disqualified, they're revoked, and that's on medical grounds. But what we want to make clear in the policy is that if those medical issues address themselves, so let's say that they've had a seizure, but then they're now on medication, and a doctor has signed them off, we want to be clear that in those circumstances that people don't have to wait 7 years after they've had their license, that once the doctor has signed them off, that if they say that they're medically fit, we've not got a problem with somebody who has a manageable medical condition being able to get straight back on the road again and earn it. So the full documents are before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions. But the key thing is that we will be bringing all of the proposed changes back before the committee before they would be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Any questions? Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick question on immigration. What's the actual scale of this this problem? Are there many taxi drivers that get caught out with having illegal immigrants?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So I'm not aware of any trafficking issues, but certainly I know of an instance in the past where we'd had somebody and they were convicted many years ago. I think that somebody had got into their car with them as they were coming across from France, and they got a conviction for assisting illegal entry into the country. But again, the guidelines, after a certain amount of years, and that wasn't something that attracted a custodial sentence at the time. So that's one instance that I know of. But out of the 50,000 drivers that Wolverhampton has, that's not many at all. But in South Staffordshire, we've not that I don't know of any immigration offences that your drivers have.
Thank you, Chair. Greg, you mentioned earlier about if somebody's had a drug conviction, it doesn't mean that they're disqualified to be a taxi driver. They could have a drug test. So are you talking about they have one drug test, or do they have to have ongoing drug tests throughout a period of time to prove not back on using drugs again? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean that's something that we can certainly consider in the consultation. But the guidance from the Institute of Licensing would that you would just have the one drugs test at the beginning. We're probably going to have to think about so when you get the tests, you can choose how long the hair is, of how long you want to be tested. So it's like on a month-by-month basis, and we've got to think about what's proportionate there for that, because it is quite a significant expense to go and get those tests. Several £100s. And again, if it's going to be the trade who have to pay for that, if there's going to be an ongoing cost, it's just what the committee thinks would be proportionate. But at the moment, the proposal is just the single test. But my opinion on this always has been, and this is currently in place to all of our decision makers, if you're concerned enough about a driver to be wanting them to undergo regular drugs testing, you shouldn't be granting them a license in the first place. So whenever that question has arisen, if you're thinking about asking somebody to go for a drugs test, just refuse the license. Because you obviously don't think that they're fit and proper. If you've got that concern. So yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just thinking several things actually about this. First of all, the fact that certain persons are actually deceiving authorities by taking driving tests, and they are being paid by someone else to take the driving test for them. Particularly the theory part, which requires some knowledge about English, as you know, not driving skills. And I'm thinking as well that if a drugs test comes in, it's simply a piece of paper. It doesn't have any photo ID on it or any other ID to present itself, and that can be fabricated with ease. And as a person myself who lost my driving license through a medical condition, I had a diabetes attack. And I think from my point of view, I would say to you, it's actually quite difficult to get your license back. It was taken from me in error. I had one incident. But the consequence of that was 5 months of not being able to drive myself. So I do welcome the restoration of licenses in those cases. And I'm very much aware that the medical knowledge in the licensing authority is not up to really scrutinising these carefully. So how are you going to scrutinise those applications? So 3 sets of things really. I think the false identification issue is something which national authorities are concerned about. And I know that I've seen drug tests results, obviously a lot myself, and I know they're just a piece of paper. And I do worry that somebody might be falsifying those, and how you're going to check them, because it's a really difficult issue on your part, checking identities.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. So in relation to the driver training that we do, so everybody undergoes the training that we do in person, the classroom training. We make sure that they all bring their photographic ID, and we do catch people out. We do catch people who are, other people have been sent to do the test for them, and if we have any suspicions, obviously we won't let them come onto the course. We also record all of our sessions, and only a couple of weeks ago, I've got video footage of somebody showing somebody behind them the answers to one of their questions. I don't think they'd realise that all of the test papers are unique, but still the principle of trying to cheat, we caught on camera, and we can obviously we stopped both of those people from passing the test. In terms of the drugs tests, and I apologise, I should have made myself clearer. We have a specific company that we use for the drugs test, and they undertake the identity checks of the person when they come in to do the test. So, and then they actually send the results directly to us. So it wouldn't be a case of you could go and, if you knew somebody who could sign you off, that wouldn't be able to happen. It would be using our approved tester that we use for our existing drivers. Yeah, in terms of the normal medical tests you do, and as you rightly say, neither myself nor anybody in our service is a doctor. And I've always said that it should never be for us to be making the decisions on whether somebody is medically fit. And that's why we require anybody who's undertaking the medical certification, they have to be on the GMC register with a license to practice medicine at the time of the inspection. If they've handed back their license, as some doctors do, that's fine. We can still accept the medical. If they've had if they've been struck off the register, we would actually ask the driver to go and get another medical with somebody else, because if they've been struck off since that medical, they might have done that one wrong in the first place. But yeah, it is a problem with people trying to impersonate things, and I don't know whether you saw we've implemented this refresher training, and we want to make sure that everybody who's done all of the training in previous years before I'm talking 10 years ago, before we brought in the much more stringent checks, that everything was above board when they did their training as well.
Thank you. I think some of the questions I've been thinking of have already been asked, but going back to the drug-related ones, you answered the question that you'd have sort of a designated company to do that, so they couldn't just go off and do it. But once I've had that, and yes, you're okay, you can come back. Do you need to do perhaps a check, perhaps every 12 months or something, to make sure that person is still okay to drive? Because I know drug driving is as much of a menace, if not more, as drink driving now. So, you know, have you got things in place to follow that up with the ones who've had to undergo the drug testing?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of have an agreement with our staffs that where your license holders, whether or the applicants, where they're not clear of the guidelines, that we always bring them before a subcommittee of this committee. And that's absolutely a tool that you could use when making your decision. If you want to grant the license and you condition it where they're required to undergo a drugs test every 12 months, and you can do that. But again, as far as I'm aware, with South staffs, this fortunately isn't an issue that has been seen. But you know, if you feel free to put that as a condition on the license with the driver. But again, as I say, my concern would be, you know, either somebody's fit and proper or they're not fit and proper. And in taxi licensing, the guidance specifically says you should not give people the benefit of the doubt. You know, our priority is public safety, and we always err on the side of caution. So if you have any concerns and you think, actually, I think you know, it might still there's a risk that you're taking drugs and driving, that you know we shouldn't be giving them a license in the first place.
One final thing, this is about suspicious persons being carried by a taxi driver. As we know, that unfortunately there have been several incidences of people both arriving by small boats and asking for taxis once they've made it out to the road, and also committing crime following very notable crime of stabbing of young people following a taxi ride. Taxi drivers, if they're carrying someone suspicious, are they actually required to report that to the police, or are they actually, and should that be inside these guidelines? I'm thinking particularly of somebody who might get on a driver catching a glimpse of a knife or a wire pack they're carrying or anything of that nature. Are they actually required to do that?
It's a very good point, and it's about, you know, duties that people have. One of the proposed conditions, and I've got it here to read out for you, that we would be adding to the license, is that the driver must report any safeguarding concerns to their private hire operator and the local authority designated safeguarding contact. Where there's an immediate risk to passengers, the driver must call the police on 999. Now, it may be that we need to expand that a little bit further, because you said suspicious persons, and I don't know whether safeguarding would necessarily cover that. And I think that perhaps we need to think about expanding the duties of a driver, because we do provide training. We provide training on county lines, modern slavery, you know, the kind of signs that you need to spot of somebody, you know, about them being nervous, or the topics of conversation and who to report that to. But in terms of actually putting that as a condition of license and making it explicit, that's something that we're hoping to address. So I'll make a note, and I'll think about some careful wording about. It's difficult, isn't it? Because you just want people to do the right thing and just report things as they see them and be vigilant. But trying to crystallize that into a specific sentence can sometimes be a little difficult. But definitely, I'll look at and broaden it from just safeguarding concerns to any other concerns about wrongdoing, or, you know, criminal intent or something like that.
Could you then please, oh, I'm sorry, could you then please just expand that to suspicious packages as well? Because I think that's the other thing that's concerning you.
Yeah, just picking up on one of the comments you made, that so before you grant a license, you shouldn't give them the benefit of the doubt. So how are you going to determine on what grounds that there's something not right here? Surely you've got to have some form of evidence or to actually say, I'm not going to give them a license. So the benefit of the doubt is a bit hairy-fairy sort of comment.
Sorry, I should have been clear that this only applies to people. So with a new application, it would only apply if we got information from another licensing authority, information from the police, or a criminal conviction on their license. We don't really have much more discretion if we've got a set of standards that a driver must meet. So if they've got a clean driving license, they've got a clean bill of health from their doctor, they've got a clean criminal record, they've attended our training, then we have to grant them a license because we say, well, those were our standards, you've met our standards. We can't just kind of conjure up another reason. But if somebody has for example, a criminal conviction, so you might say that, so our guidelines for drink driving is that 7 years after the end of their disqualification, that we would normally grant them a license, and that's in line with what every other council does that I'm aware of, and the government guidance as well. But you might get somebody who'd had a conviction in 2020, in which case then we've got to have a hearing with South Staffordshire. That's obviously the subcommittee hearing, and you might go, well, actually you're a few years off, but depending upon the evidence that somebody might present at the hearing. So for example, they could prove that they've been participating in, this was a real watershed moment in their life. And they were like, I realised my drinking was getting out of hand. I've taken part in Alcoholics Anonymous. I actually haven't drank at all in the last, 5 years. You might be able to go, well, actually, I'm more reassured, and I could depart from the guidelines early. So you could do that. But the point is that, if you're 50-50, you're supposed to refuse any applications and just always be cautious.
Just this carries on from what Penny was talking about when a driver should notify the police. If you put something like that in your conditions, I think it also gives the driver a sense of security as well, to think, well, in the past, should I be notifying anyone? But if you've actually got something written down, it will give them some certainty of what they should be doing. So it sort of gives them a buffer as well.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with that entirely. The license conditions aren't just a stick to beat the driver with and say, well, you've done this wrong. It's kind of a bit of a guide on how to be a good driver. And if you check the driver conditions particularly, we've tried to sort it out so that it's broken down into clear sections, because our conditions, like many other councils, they've built up over many years. There's no order to them. We just kind of, you stick one on the bottom when you think of a new idea. But the first section is about information that you need to notify to the licensing authority, and then it goes on, and there's a big section on conduct, and then the next section is what you must do before a journey. Then the next section during a journey, and then the next section is after a journey. So it very much has that kind of chronological view of how they should be conducting every single journey, and like you say, to give them that reassurance of, oh, actually I am following the rules. If every driver read the conditions in full and understands them, and follows them, there's not going to be any problems.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, Greg. Going back to Penny's point about passengers with weapons. When you do spot checks, do you ever find drivers with weapons? Thank you.
So it'd be very rare to find. The problem is that a lot of things can be interpreted as a weapon, and we've had lots of incidences with the police where they found things like a tire wrench in the car, and then the police have said, oh, that's a weapon, and we go, well, it could be a weapon, but a pen can be a weapon in the circumstances. And if the driver's not using it in that situation in a violent way, then it's not really a weapon. So no, we've not. I'm not aware of finding any knives or firearms in the vehicle. But sometimes I think there have been like sports bats that have been found in the boot. Sometimes there's the police have said, well, is this a weapon? It's difficult as well because sometimes passengers leave things in vehicles, and unfortunately, that can cause problems. Particularly drugs. I'm 100% certain that when we found some drugs in the car that actually didn't belong to the driver, it did belong to the passenger. But this is why another one of our license conditions makes it very clear. I'll tell a lie. I remember one incident, and there was a knife, and it was a passenger. It was a passenger who'd left the knife in the vehicle because the driver had reported it to us. But sorry, I lost my train of thought there. There's a line of condition. So there's a condition that says that you have to check your vehicle after the end of every journey, and it's to avoid situations like being pulled over by the police or being pulled over by the compliance officers, and us finding something in the vehicle. Well, if you check every single time, as this gentleman had done, and he'd found a knife in his vehicle, you notify the council or your operator and you say, I've found a knife in my vehicle. That then, later on, if that gets found in there, we go, well, I've got proof here. I did my job. I followed my my license conditions. But yeah, really, people need to be checking the vehicles.
The role of the police here is quite critical to what you're doing as well. And I wonder how much involved they are in your training and whether they do actually help inform your drivers about suspicious persons or suspicious packages or anything else they're supposed to look for. Thinking particularly at times of heightened tension, when the security level in this country really rockets up to red. When those kind of things happen, are the police involved in assisting your drivers to protect themselves actually as well as everyone else?
So we do work very closely with the police, and we have to, and that's because at the moment there are no powers for our compliance officers to stop moving traffic. So we can inspect the vehicles when they're stationary, but we can't obviously put the blue lights on and pull them over. So whenever we want to do compliance operations, including in South Staffordshire, that is with the police to make sure we can pull them over. One of the big things that we did a couple of years ago was to create this driver safety pamphlet, and it has some really interesting bits of advice on there because we asked the trade and we said, can you tell us what are your top tips? And one of the things that came back was having a second key in the car, because one of the drivers had an incident where somebody had run off without paying, but they'd grabbed the car key and then thrown the car key in the hedges, and then the driver spent a long time looking for it. So then he said, well, actually, I now keep a second car key in the vehicle. Because you can just leave, you can't find it, you can leave that one and carry on driving. So there are other little things that us as licensing officers aren't going to think about because we're not doing the job. So we've got that online, and that's obviously available to any driver in the country, not just our own. And obviously that went through our trade group, which the police are a part of as well. The other thing as well, and again, all the things that we're trying to do to make the job as safe as we can. We removed that door signage from the vehicles, and that was something it coincided with, but it wasn't intentional. When we had the riots last summer, there was a big outcry from the trade in other areas that were saying we don't like how visible the door signage makes the private hire vehicles, because they can become a bit of a target. Sometimes people perceive taxis to be a bit of a I don't know, a symbol of the state or associated with public bodies, and they don't, they don't treat them with the same respect sometimes. So, I mean, at the trade group regularly we say that there's issues with children who target taxis, throwing bricks at them, and they say they only do it to the taxis. So actually, by removing those door signs, that's provided a little bit more security for the trade as well.
Thank you, Chair. On the subject of safety, what is the policy if a driver goes out, somebody phones in, legitimately books a taxi, the driver goes out, pulls up, takes a look at the person, thinks, I'm not happy about this at all. I'm really not happy about taking this person in. What happens then? Thank you.
So you've got to have a reasonable excuse, and that's going to depend on the circumstances of the situation. Sometimes drivers will refuse people if they're too drunk. They don't want them to get them in the vehicle. We encourage people to, the drivers are obviously entitled to do that, but if somebody's, seriously drunk but also vulnerable, then really we would want them to offer them help and medical care in sorting that out. But yeah, if somebody's, I mean, one of our drivers told me, he said he was down working on the rank, and the passenger opened up his coat and he got a big knife in his coat, and he said, and he was asking for a lift, and he showed him his knife, and they all said no, obviously we're not going to take it, because you just don't know what he was going to what he was doing. So in that circumstance, if someone's waving a knife around, then yeah, no, definitely we wouldn't encourage anybody to take somebody on there. But the most important thing is that it cannot be a reason. Sorry, it cannot be because of a protected characteristic. So something that we want to work very clearly on is about the guide dogs and the assistance dogs. And the drivers cannot refuse to carry a passenger who has an assistance dog. And the same with wheelchair users as well. We had one recently where he'd refused to carry the passenger in the wheelchair. He said he didn't fit in the car, and we said, but you didn't even try. He just kind of said, oh, I don't want the aggro, I don't want the hassle. But if somebody had shown, if they'd have, because some of the boot spaces can be a bit smaller, and if you weren't aware that there was going to be a wheelchair, if you've made every attempt to fit the wheelchair in the vehicle and it doesn't fit safely into the vehicle, then that's a legitimate reason. Even though that person has a disability, if you cannot safely carry them, then you shouldn't, and you're going to have to refuse them. You've got to be polite about it, and you can, ask the base to send another vehicle so that they're not, stranded on their own. So yeah, it's all about what's reasonable in the context.
Back and thank you, Greg. I think you've answered all of those questions very, very comprehensively. Very good. Item 5, review of fees for Hackney carriage and private hire licensing functions for 2025-2026. Over to you, Greg.
Thank you very much. So these, it's a review of the fees. We are proposing to keep the fees the same at the moment. However, I'm fairly confident that we're going to require a mid-year price rise at some point. The fees have been kept very low. I think that they're still lower than what they were 5-6 years ago in Wolverhampton. And we've been looking to spend more money on more officers to improve the speeds at which we can process applications and improve the amount of compliance work that's been done. And while we had a small reserve from the previous years, we're working our way through that. So we will be looking to review the prices to make sure that, again, it's a very difficult tightrope that I have to walk, where we're not allowed to make any profit. We're allowed to keep a small surplus, but we've got to try and keep the fees cost neutral. We can't use the money for anything that's not related to taxi licensing. And as I say, they were balanced at the end of the last financial year, but just trying to work out how they're going to be for the next financial year, especially with the new agreement that's been in place there. We will probably have to do a review at some point. But for the time being, the beginning of the financial year, they're all staying the same. And I've just clarified on there that we'll now offer a service that if somebody loses or breaks or whatever their lanyard, we can post them a new one out for £4, as they can do that. And if they wanted to come and collect it, they'd only have to pay £1. But sometimes it's just a bit easier to get it delivered, isn't it? And that if somebody's license plates are lost or stolen, I'm not aware of that happening for any of the South Staffordshire trade, but there's a reduced fee of £37 to be paid to get a replacement license plate. So I've just popped that onto the charges as well. So again, the recommendations are before you for the fees and charges for this financial year.
And I just ask for recommendations for item 4, the consultation on changing to the taxi licensing conditions. Were you all happy with those conditions that we discussed on item 4? We're all happy to accept them. Yeah. And item 5, the fees, I think it's only fair that it's very good that they haven't gone up. Everything else seems to have gone up. So I think that's a good recommendation. You all happy with that one? Are there any questions you want to ask Greg on the fees or anything before we, Chris?
Yes. Just a quick one, just to clarify in section 5 of the report. It talks about a PDF format for the lanyards, and I just wanted to know what the difference was between the badges to be emailed out in PDF and the badge and in the lanyard.
Yeah, so when we issue a license, there's kind of two parts to the license. There's the badge, which, as you've seen now, is that nice contactless badge which opens up on someone's phone. But then we also, what we call a paper license, but isn't actually a paper license anymore. It's kind of like the counterpart document. And it's similar to, the DVLA stopped sending out the paper ones, didn't they? And again, to try and move with the times and keep prices low, save our officers spending lots of times printing out this paper, which, most of the time just sat at home in a folder and it wasn't really kind of used for anything. All we're doing is we're emailing out, and we use the PDF format because it's a little bit harder to tamper with. If they were so inclined to commit fraud, so we send it out via a PDF via email. But what we are encouraging the operators who give the work to the drivers to do is not to rely just on the license, because we publish an online register every day, and any document can be forged, but you can't forge our online register. One of the drivers couldn't do that. They can't access that. So we are encouraging operators to use our register to see, if somebody comes to them and says, "Oh, I want to work for you. What's your badge number?" Search it in, put it in our register, and then they can see whether they're licensed or not.
Thank you. Item 6, the taxi CCTV policy, the audio recording. Over to you, Greg.
Thank you very much. So this was previously brought to yourselves and you approved a consultation on it. We had some really positive feedback for the consultation. I mean, it's kind of a win-win policy, this. It doesn't cost the council anything. It's not a mandatory requirement, but what it does mean is that if a driver wants to go to the expense of installing a CCTV system in their car that has the audio recording, that it's done in a way which balances the protection of them with the passenger's privacy. So none of the vehicles are going to have it where it's just recording audio all of the time. That's illegal. It's not found to be proportionate. But there will be a switch in the vehicles for those that install it, that either the driver or the passengers can turn on at any time, and then that will mean that the audio recording begins. The drivers have said that they've found it a bit frustrating at times when they're accused of saying certain things, and they know that they didn't say it. But now they can, flick as soon as things start to get a little bit heated, they can say, turn the audio recording on just to protect me from anything I might be accused of. Saying. And as I say, the systems aren't cheap. It's not like a dash cam from a garage. These are specialist equipment that's, £300, £400, £500. And we've got a list of approved providers on our website that meet the requirements for the Wolverhampton trade. So yes, but we have had a few people have already taken up this system. So as I say, I think it's a really good thing. It's one of the final few things that we think we can do to improve driver safety, but it does obviously also offer benefits for passengers as well. So the recommendation to approve the new CCTV policy is in the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions on the CCTV. Thank you.
Chair, sorry, did you say that the customer can actually turn on as well? Thank you.
Yes, so that's the beauty about this system. It's not just a one-way thing. Is that the switch will be located in the vehicle. So it depends on which system they're going for. So we're not said, there's only this one system that's available, but sometimes they just have it on the roof. Sometimes there are multiple switches. But one of the key things that we've said is that it's got to be accessible to both drivers and passengers, so they can flick it on as well. Yeah.
Greg, I think you've earned your money this afternoon. Thank you so much. Very, very comprehensive, and thank you for reporting on everything. Very well done. I'm sure we'll be seeing you very soon again. You seem to.
Yes.
July, is it right?
Yeah.
Let's hope we have some sunshine before then. Very nice to see you. I'm going to close the meeting now at 3:15. Thank you all for coming. Cheerio. Bye-bye.